Back in 2010, I was working for Crispin Porter and Bogusky. They're a big ad agency, and I did a lot with them. I got to do a Super Bowl spot for Best Buy, but the other work I'd done for Best Buy included some of their campaigns. I would do the animatics. So they would have a commercial idea, they would want to pitch it, and they would have storyboards done to a temp track and temp VO, and then they would send it off to a focus group. I worked in this one campaign called Beat Santa. Have you guys heard of this campaign or seen it? Okay, so the premise of the commercial campaign was that every year moms get stiffed by not getting credit for great gifts because Santa gets all the credit and moms get left out. So this year they were going to shop at Best Buy and they were going to wow their family with these wonderful gifts. As I'm doing the animatics, so it's like pan and scan in Final Cut Pro, I'm not loving the concept. And I vocalize it, not that it matters because I'm so low on that hierarchy, but they sent it off anyway to a focus group that was based in Atlanta that would wrangle people in a mall, give them $20 and a sandwich in exchange to answer some questions. So it got approved and they sent it off to a production house in Los Angeles. It was a massive soundstage. I don't remember the name of the company, but I do remember that the Santa suit, this suit cost $30,000. They were very proud of this. They wanted to share that. But I didn't think the commercials came out particularly well, and sure enough, when they launched them, shortly after, they pulled all the ads. And the feedback was that suburban moms hated it, to the point where they were writing death threats to Best Buy. They were like, how could you be so mean to Santa? And in all fairness, it was pretty brutal. Like, the moms were doing way more than gloating. They were like rubbing it in and humiliating Santa. And he's like this poor innocent guy, just like, I'm trying to do my work. But the question that came up for me was why this got approved when seemingly everyone knew that it was a bad idea, it was a bad campaign. And the response I constantly heard from creative directors and stakeholders was, it tested well, which is language to say that the CFO has covered his or her ass and we don't have to worry about it. But it fostered this nagging question I had about how do you really know what people think about your media? And they've got these questionnaires here, and it's similar to what they did in the focus groups. But the people are not honest about what they're feeling. They say that they don't like a product, but then they go and they buy it. And so I wanted to figure out if there's any kind of metrics to this. Fast forward to 2015, I started a different business with my business partner, Austin, who's on the left here. We were going to do our own radical agency until he got a call from a client asking if we could do a training film. We'd never done a training film, so we're like, sure, we'll take a stab at it. And we made it just like a normal short film. We hired actors, we had crew, production designers, set designers, and sent it off to Randy, the client. And Randy called us after he watched it and he said, this is your calling. And I thought, like, this is like kind of a bizarre thing, like, all right, man, like, thank you for the compliment. And he goes, no, I gotta show you what we have been using. And he sent, so you know, like the tropes. It's everyone's perpetually stuck in the 80s. You know, with their clothes and their hair. They speak this weird corporate lingo. In fact, I remember one I had worked on to refresh when they sent us the old version. They didn't even have a name for the fictional product. It was just the machine. And it was like ominously like a printer or something, but it was the machine. For me, this really showed that there was a need in the market within adult learning. So we pivoted and we started doing these things. And we had like a lot of clients to our name. I mean, I worked for 20 Fortune 500 companies. And we thought this was going to be enough to go in and sell people on the stuff that we're doing. But they didn't really care because it wasn't the metrics that they wanted. We would flash all this stuff up and be like, we're doing great stuff. But the minute that they heard it was like more emotional, it was more legitimate, it was like they didn't care. And I don't know if you've tried to get into learning and development as an industry, it is very challenging. They want specific metrics. And it doesn't matter if you sell them on aesthetics, they don't care. And that was all we had as a unique value proposition. So when we would go to these trade shows and I would go to pitch to clients, I would just say, but our stuff looks better and it's more believable and it sounds better. And they didn't really care. So I was tasked with trying to find a more objective measure of, do movies impact us in real life? And that was the real question. Is there objective standards by which we can do that? Before I begin, I want to just show you kind of an example of a training film that we did, and I'll talk to you a little bit about the industry later, but just so you can get a sense of where I'm coming from here.
Baby, where are you?
Help me!
Beth!
Mama!
Baby, where are you?
I'm here! Please! I'm over here!
How did you get in there?
I can't get out!
Baby, hold on. I'm coming. Baby, I'll get you out. Hold on. Please help me. My daughter is trapped. Help me.
This is the part where I usually wake up.
Do you know what this is training for? What this training film would be for? What industry?
Grief counseling? Psychology.
Food safety. Doesn't have to have any relation to food. And yet somehow like companies swear by the fact that they have to show exactly what the working conditions are on screen. And so a lot of the features that we had in here allowed the viewer to analogize what they saw and say, well, how does this apply to my life? There's a scene where the woman there is having a fight with her husband, and their argument has been used as a way to diffuse conflict between team shifts changing. It's that bizarre. But our minds do a lot with movies, like we really do kind of suspend this disbelief for a little bit and then reflect back. My business partner stumbled across an article on this field of psychology, this subset of psychology called Neurocinematics. And essentially it studies the brain's response, neurological response to media. And I would obsess over this stuff. I would read all these studies and I would take them and I would apply them back to my training. So I would be like, okay, there's a feature where if you have a longer lens or a face that's projected larger in frame, it's more memorable and it's more likable. It's like, well, what do you do with that? And where do you see instances where that makes a difference? I think about Dunkirk a lot, that they framed that film for IMAX, so they did not want any large faces or any punch-ins, and you could not track who the main character was, because everyone was like forgettable. They were all bland looking, and that may be used to creative effect. It's not to say that Nolan missed something there, but it's something to know going into your filmmaking or your storytelling and knowing what you can leverage to your advantage. And I want to make a brief caveat here, because I think sometimes when I talk about what I'm going to talk about, people get a little bit, especially artists, they cringe a bit and they squirm when they're like, man, you're really taking the human out of the human experience. And while I'm inclined to agree to a certain extent, data is only something that you measure in the past, and it's nothing different than the techniques that you use now, where you have a low angle shot or you know the importance of an insert shot. These are techniques that you use to tell a better story. And I look at certain kinds of data trends as similar. It's important to look at these things because you're not going to make a film from data, but you can help to stack statistically significant data to your advantage. And that's largely what we're doing. Since the advent of Neurocinematics, which was founded in 2009 by a guy named Yuri Hassan, when fMRI machines were all the rage. Everyone had one in their den or their living room. But he was using them in conjunction with EEG machines to scan brain activity while people were watching movies. And he found some really phenomenal, interesting things. He found that for some reason, the more classically masterful we considered a director, the more engaging their content was. So he would show episodes of a Hitchcock program, and then he would show episodes of Curb Your Enthusiasm. And he would watch everyone's brain activity, and he would match them up, line them up against each other. And he found that 65% of the audience was having the exact same neurological experience when they were watching Hitchcock, versus I think Larry David's was like 14%, 13, 14%. So Hitchcock was doing something very, very correct in terms of unifying his audience, focusing on what we're calling immersion. Immersion is essentially in two different capacities. It's how engaged people are emotionally in your content, but it's also used by certain neuroscience companies to track your engagement in real time. The problem with Hassan's work is that you're in an fMRI machine, so the viewing conditions are not ideal. You're not able to like enjoy the experience. You got this little bit of screen, it's very noisy. So the fact that 65% were enjoying Hitchcock at all is kind of a wonder. As we're thinking about immersion, the reason why I think this is important is because going back to the story about the Beat Santa campaign, self-reported data around what makes a hit or what people are going to watch is completely inaccurate. You'd be better off gambling. The estimate is 17%. If someone says they're going to watch a show, it's 17% likely that they're actually going to watch it. But if you have immersion tools where you can measure their actual engagement, their emotional engagement, it can be 84% accurate. You can tell within the first minute of watching somebody using an immersion tool whether or not a show is going to be successful in the first minute. This is so important for you to start off really strong. None of these like long expository scenes. Get right into the action. All right, so how do we do this? We gotta talk a little bit about the brain. A lot of you are really educated in the brain. I brought this presentation here to be a simplified model. So I'm going to be doing some things that you might, wince at. But just bear with me, okay? Because I think this is more about applying the stuff that we learn. And when we think about the brain operates in wavelengths. So you have alpha waves that are typically associated with transitory activities when I start shifting attention. Or if I'm in a creative state, then I've got very high presence of theta waves. When I'm asleep, I've got delta waves. Or when I have a breakthrough, I've got gamma. All these things are operating based on a specific set of tasks. And they are executed by certain kinds of neurotransmitters that are like the circuitry that connect these activities. And the three I want us to focus on are dopamine, oxytocin, and serotonin. All right, as a quick reminder, dopamine is the uncertainty molecule. This is what we consider when something is new and changed in the environment. If I were to give you $20, you'd be like, oh my God, this is great, and you get a little spike in your brain, and you'd have a dopaminergic reaction. If I keep giving you $20 every 5 minutes on a schedule, you will still enjoy the gift, but you're not going to have any more dopamine responses. This is why infinite scroll is so powerful, because it's not about the next piece of content. I don't care if the next video I see is the best thing I've ever seen in my life. I care that I don't know what's going to happen. So it's not about the reward, it's about the mechanism. It's very, very dangerous, but it's also related to our survival. An absence of dopamine can result in hopelessness and even suicidal ideation. It's very, very powerful. So we need a balance. And the problem with dopamine too is that you can easily overwhelm the system to the point that the brain suppresses its production. And that's why you get addicted to social media. It's like you just keep going for it. And there's a causal equation between social media and depression. It's not correlative. It's not, oh, I'm depressed so I get on social media. It gets you thinking about it when you're not using it. And so it's very dangerous. And in movie making and storytelling, you only have so much bandwidth for that. We've all seen action films that were vapid, and we started to lose enthusiasm when they didn't have any kind of plot or semblance of emotional connection. And so that is why we need oxytocin, because it is the care molecule. So oxytocin is the neurotransmitter associated with emotional resonance and psychological safety, which means the level of do I give a shitness. And that's something that we need to be focusing on as we're evolving our stories, because we want our characters to inspire some kind of compassion. We want people to care about our characters. We want a high level of oxytocin because it's what keeps people going through the rest of your program. And then finally, we have serotonin, which does a lot of different things. But the main interest to us is in the emotional regulation. We can map this onto a very convenient framework like 3-act structure, and we can see that they very conveniently align. We have the setup, which is the hook. We have a strong dopamine. We have people that are like asking a lot of why questions. We get them in real quick. But we can't sustain that the entire time. We have to move them into the care portion, have them have releases of oxytocin. The thing too is it doesn't matter if your main character inspires oxytocin. You can have bit players that people just tend to like. You should show them more in your movie or your commercial. It will boost the overall level of immersion just by having them. And then finally, we have serotonin, which is the afterthought. Okay, so Jaws left me super anxious. How do I process this? What does it mean for my relationship to sharks? And so you now have this trailing residual effect that your movie has after. So setup, confrontation resolution, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin. How do you measure the engagement? All we need to know is how much dopamine is there, how much oxytocin is there. The serotonin, it's not as important because the predictors are primarily on those two neurotransmitters. Dopamine for attention, oxytocin for emotional resonance. If we can get those two factors, we're doing really, really well. All right, so for measurement, typically you have a lot of options. You can do, like I said, the fMRI machine, but the condition's not ideal. You've got eye tracking software, but eye tracking software only measures dopaminergic responses. So I can wave to you, and this will generate some dopamine because you're like, oh God, what's he going to do? Is he going to freak out and flip out? But it's just where your eyes are looking. There's no emotional resonance. You could draw blood samples, so maybe you want to have a cage match with your focus group and just pick up the samples. But then again, you don't also get it in real time. I started working with a company called Immersion out of Boulder, and what they do is they actually have wearable tech. So Apple Watch, Fitbit, Garmin, you name it, and they can track the levels of dopamine and oxytocin based on heart rate alone. And this is a game changer for me because it's so unintrusive, but you also get real-time data. Netflix and Marvel Studios would use this, and they would literally just show them trailers, and over time, you can see on a second-to-second basis what's happening and the level of immersion within their trailer. So you can see toward the middle, this is for Shang-Chi, it had a really interesting dynamic where the male population liked some parts of the trailer but not others, and then the female population had the exact opposite. And I think part of it was because the opening training montage, we've seen it before. It was literally like a reboot of Rumble in the Bronx. I think almost like shot for shot. And so it's like, I'm familiar with that, so it's not as new to me. I'm not having a dopaminergic response because I've seen this montage my entire childhood. What's great about this is that now you can look at sections where there's just waning interest. And you as an editor or as a creative often will just say, well, this is a good enough part, and you kind of check out. But if you have the opportunity to see, okay, no, I'm actually disassociating to some degree, what can I do differently to make this interesting? And the other thing that I noticed is that for movie trailers especially, is that they would never show the date of when it was going to premiere until there was low immersion. So people would just be checked out, and now they show the date, which is the most important piece. So if you have a call to action in a commercial, high immersion, you need a high immersion rate, that will drive people to have an action. And it's the same thing we do with training films where we have very high immersion for this specific thing we want them to learn. Now, you can see it's like a bit of a roller coaster, and it should be. You don't want to pack everything in and just ride at 100% because it's exhausting. But you should know where those pieces are, and they should be intentional. If you don't really care, and it's more like, well, my mom says my stuff is great, and so I'm not doing anything about it, then you don't have to worry. But if you want a little bit more granular insight, these options are available. This particular program is tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars a month. So it's not really cost effective for most organizations. But they did release an app as of this last week. What it allows you to do is to track your moments of happiness and engagement. So the reason it's called 6, this is kind of the interesting tangent about this, is they were testing this software out on a B2C basis, and they could predict someone having a depressive episode 2 days before they had one. And again, it's that immersion. So when we talk about movie making as really impacting people's lives, it's one of those areas where you're giving them these spikes. It's no different than you taking 10,000 steps as a general metric for health and wellness. You should have 6 of these spikes per day to keep you happy and engaged. Otherwise, it means something's going on. So I think this is a really powerful tool, and it's a free app. This is why they're using it, because they want people to be able to track their engagement from a wellness perspective. But the secret is that the architecture is the same that they're using for movie making. You could send a YouTube link, someone would watch it, and then their data is anonymously sent back. So you can just say, hey, check this out. They click it, and then you get that data back for yourself. It's just another tool I feel like is really potent in trying to analyze how we can improve our storytelling through neuroscience. So that's my main presentation here, was just to kind of give you the layout of the 3-act structure as it corresponds to dopamine, oxytocin, and serotonin. Also to look at other tools, and there are more like this that are available. I like these guys, so I use them, but the fact that this is a tool available to the public is fascinating. And to also encourage you to not look at data as somehow being, a dirty word to a large degree. And that, people are using it, and it's time to kind of take it back, tell more engaging stories, get people to care. Where we have the most potency is in human stories. AI can write a script, it's not very good. They don't have memories, they don't have emotions. And so this is something where it's what differentiates us as creative people. It keeps, filmmaking and video production alive. There's a lot of really powerful stuff in doing this. I mean, I talked a little bit about if you can up the immersion score for your product, it can be a lot more successful. They did this with Spotify songs, and they could take a song from 200,000 likes to 1 million likes and more just by increasing its immersion by 10%. A 10% increase, that's insane. So what they would do is they would remix and re-release, and we've seen this a lot. Like Oliver Tree has done this consistently, and I don't know if that's what, and literally we'll take a song that has been doing well, it'll go through TikTok and it'll be really popular, and then we'll remix differently, speed it up, pitch shift it, and then notice that the engagement's higher, and then re-release. So there are a myriad ways to do that. But even in filmmaking, I mean, adding music alone, there's nothing. It does more good than it does harm. So I think it's something like 15 to 30% increase just by having music in your piece, because again, it creates an emotional resonance aspect, which you need both of those pieces. One thing that we don't admit to is how our brains treat media as though it's real life. And my biggest piece of advice for people is treat it as though it's absolutely real. You can go to a movie theater and watch a horror film, and if you turn around and look at people, during gory scenes, they will cover their vital organs. Like they'll shield them. And then you ask them about it later and they're like, I have no idea what you're talking about. This is all subconscious. And so a lot of what we're talking about is what people cannot control. There's just a lot of resources out there now, a lot of studies out there now that are worth looking at because it informs your movie making. Okay, and feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn if you have any other questions. See what I can help answer.